Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jia hooch, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is a special St. Patrick's Day edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are so honored that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. We have a wonderful show for you today. 6 authors from CatholicTeenBooks.com. Amanda Lauer, Antony Kolenc, Leslea Wahl, Carolyn Astfalk, M Gaouette, and Corrina Turner are here to celebrate their Treasures, Visible and Invisible anthology series. And today we celebrate their St. Patrick's Day anthology. Before we invite our guests into the studio, we want to take just a moment to thank you so very much for joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. And we really hope that you'll be with us for every episode of the show. And sign up for our newsletter at readingwithyourkids.com. And also, we hope that you'll subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. We also hope that you'll connect with us on social media, Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at readingwithyourkids on Instagram, at JedleyMagic on Twitter. And of course, please go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Check out our blog, check out our merch page, and of course, sign up for our free newsletter. Join us right now from literally all over the world. Really excited to welcome back a number of these guests and to make some new friends. Our guests today are members of the Catholic Teen Books group, and they've been on the show before. They helped us have a fantastic Christmas edition of the podcast. Today they're here to celebrate the third in their anthology series. It's called Visible and Invisible. The latest edition is called Treasures. Please welcome back to the show Leslea Wahl, Antony Kolenc, Carolyn Astfalk, Corrina Turner, and Bryn, welcoming to the show for the first time, Amanda Lauer and M Gaouette. Welcome, everyone. How are you guys?
Great.
Wonderful.
Very good.
Excellent. I'm really excited. We're going to go around and meet all of our guests here. But first, why don't we start with Leslea, who's been a great friend of the show and really involved in the Catholic Teen Books group. Leslea, welcome back. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration for Visible and Invisible.
Sure. So this is Treasures, Visible and Invisible is our third anthology. They all have that theme, Visible and Invisible. We started with Secrets and then Gifts, which is a Christmas one. And we had so much fun with it, we wanted to do a third one. And we were brainstorming, Susan Peak and I one time, and we kind of had an idea of creating an anthology but have all the stories linked together in some way. And as we all started collaborating, we thought of St. Patrick and maybe a relic. And so our stories start in St. Patrick's time and go through history, story down to a dystopian story. So it's a great for St. Patrick's Day, but also be great for confirmation or just any time to show the importance of relics and our faith.
This is something neat. I know that our audience consists of all faiths and cultures and lots of folks who don't have a faith or a traditional religious background. We hear in people in the mainstream hear Catholics refer to saints and maybe they hear about relics, but I don't think they have an understanding of that. Amanda, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about the Catholic tradition of relics and what that means? That something is a relic, and is it something we wave and magic happens, or is it something else?
No, it's just something from the past, usually related to someone who is a saint or something like that. We don't worship them or anything like that, but it's just like a remembrance. And as far as the saints go, we look to the saints for their intercession in our lives. I always tell people, I have a great devotion to the Blessed Mother, and And of course I pray to God, I pray to Jesus, I pray to the Holy Spirit, but I pray to the Blessed Mother because I always feel like she's in heaven right next to Jesus. And when I pray to her, she's elbowing her son saying, hey, listen to this person right here. They have a request. You need to list it up. And I really feel like she's a great intercessor because she, like all the saints, they're in heaven. All they can do, I mean, one of the greatest things they can do is pray 24 hours a day. And if I ask a friend to pray for me, they might pray for me once during the day. But if you actually pray to a saint, they will literally devote their time to praying for you and with you for an intercession in your life.
I like that image, and I think it makes sense for a lot of folks asking a saint to intercede for us. And you use the image of our Blessed Mother Mary, just kind of going, yo, Jesus, check it, Amanda needs something. Can you give her a listen over here? And it's certainly something that we do in our lives, especially those of us who have kids who might be looking for jobs might pick up the phone and say, hey, TM, I have a kid who's looking for a job. Do you have something they can do in your company? And a lot of times those bosses will listen a little bit more. I think that Jesus listens to us all equally, but I don't think it hurts to have his mom say, hey, give Amanda a listen there, Jesus. TM, what about St. Patrick? What's this? We hear a lot about St. Patrick. He's probably one of the more well-known saints outside, within and without of the church. What's your understanding of St. Patrick?
Well, St. Patrick, I think the biggest thing about him was the adversity that he had to undergo as a child. He was basically enslaved. And so he had a lot of struggle where he had to live in an environment that he was not used to. Now, in Teresa Linden's story, her one is called Treasure in the Bogs. It tells a lot about where St. Patrick was living and how he was living in a environment where they were worshiping false gods. And in the beginning, she tells a story of how Patrick also really didn't believe in God, and that while he didn't really worship the false gods, he didn't really believe in any god. So it just shows that St. Patrick is the one who, after understanding the true meaning of God and how important he was, and that he was the one true God, how he wanted to share that with others. And the big story about St. Patrick was how he did share the truth about God and who God was. And I think the biggest lesson, and this is what goes through the stories and treasures, is his way of explaining how the Trinity works, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, because that is something that's hard for us to all understand. How can the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be one? And how could he explain that to the people in Ireland? So he did that through the clover, the 3 parts of the clover. It's one leaf, but it's made out of 3 parts, and that is how the Trinity works. And so I think the biggest story that comes from St. Patrick is how he was able to explain that and explain the Trinity, and how they were equally important, but they all had their different roles as far as being the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I think in Teresa's story, she was able to give us, obviously it's fictional, the story itself, but based on the truth of who St. Patrick was and what he was able to offer us and the Catholic faith.
Corrina, one of the biggest things I think that people are surprised about is when they learn that St. Patrick wasn't Irish.
No, he was kidnapped from Britain and taken over as a youth. Yes.
Yeah, that's a big surprise for a lot of folks. What is it about St. Patrick's that inspires you the most, Corrina?
Oh, I think it's very impressive, the fact that he was kidnapped, which must have been a terrible ordeal, taken to Ireland as a youngster, and he actually got away and he got back to Britain, and he chose to go back to Ireland when he was older to try and convert them all, out of love for the Irish people, despite the fact that he had an immensely traumatic experience in Ireland. But he loved them the way God loved them, and he went back to them.
That is a great example of forgiveness and love, and that's something that's so important in our faith. Tony, what story did you write about, and what did you contribute for this anthology?
So what we decided to do was to basically create a fictional relic. It's a clover, a three-leaf clover, like TM was just talking about. And it's not actually associated with St. Patrick, but in our stories it is. And so this relic sort of goes from story to story. And my story takes place in 1185 A.D., and the last time I was on your show, I was talking about the Harwood Mysteries series that I have. Between book 1, Shadow in the Dark, and book 2, The Haunted Cathedral, I've created this short story involving one of the main characters, Lucy. And so she is at Harwood Abbey, and she finds this hidden clover, and she has to solve a mystery related to it. So I kind of used it as an opportunity to explore a little more into one of the main characters from my series, and at the same time kind of carry the story forward about this relic.
That's really neat. Hey, Carolyn, down in Hershey, Pennsylvania, one of the sweetest places on earth. What story, what relic did you write about for the anthology?
Well, my story takes place in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, right before the time of the flood in the late 1880s. So I spent half my life about an hour west of Johnstown, and then the second half of my life so far on an hour east of Johnstown. And I've visited there to visit friends and walked on the grounds there where the dam broke and flooded Johnstown. So I've been fascinated with that era. So for my first stab at something historical, I chose to place the story there in the context of the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, where all the wealthiest men of the time, like Andrew Carnegie and Mellon and Frick, all had their summer resort. And of course, then you have a lot of, I don't know if they might be poverty-stricken, but a lot of immigrant families, lower class, that are working there in Johnstown. It's a really interesting place to set a story, and I thought a great place where there's a lot of immigrants that are Catholic, that this relic will pass through their hands.
I've actually performed in Johnstown. I had a lovely memory of being there, and someday I'll tell the story. This little girl named Pam, who is deaf, decided that she wanted to be the volunteer to come up and be part of my levitation illusion, and it was really, really fun. A lot of the teachers didn't want her to get involved. They thought that she couldn't do it, but she proved them wrong. And the neat thing was, at the end of this illusion, without anybody encouraging the kids, they all chose to applaud for her using the American Sign Language way of applauding, which is kind of wiggling their hands back and forth. And it was just spontaneous and really, really wonderful. TM, this is your first visit to the podcast. I'm curious what you wrote about for the anthology.
Well, my story was more to the present time. It was contemporary. Mm-hmm. It's actually right before Corrina's story, and her one is the dystopian one. And mine is around the time 2000, and it's set in London. And it's basically, without giving anything away, it's about a young girl who struggles with her father and has decided to leave home. She's basically on the streets now, and it's her first night there, and she meets someone there. And the story is basically, the theme is how the teachings of St. Patrick have passed through time. So in Teresa's first story, she introduces and we didn't know this because we all wrote our stories at separate times, so we hadn't even read each other's stories. So she, in her first story, had introduced St. Patrick's Lorica. And in my story, one of the characters recites part of the Lorica. And initially, I think Teresa was concerned because we both had the same, prayer or hymn in it. But I felt that it was just like how the relic passes along in time. The teachings of St. Patrick have passed along in time through all these eras, through all these stories. And oftentimes, if they can, both these characters are not strong in their faith at all. In fact, they probably don't know that much about the Catholic faith or St. Patrick themselves. But it's almost like when Christ wants to introduce himself to you, he will do that in his way and when you need it. The Lorica is about protection. And in that time, both characters are in a situation in their lives where they need protection because they don't have their families around them. They probably don't have very close people who care about them. And I don't want to give too much away, but they have this that was given to them through St. Patrick that keeps them feeling safe. And so that the story is basically how people, and the story is called In Mouth of Friend and Stranger, how Christ is brought to you through the mouth of a stranger.
Wow, that's really cool. Amanda, I'm looking forward to hearing what you contribute to the anthology.
Yeah, my story takes place right after Tony's. It's set in 1540 during the reign of King Henry VIII in England, and it's set during the time of what they call the dissolution of the monasteries. So basically, it was when they were somewhat destroying the Catholic faith and destroying all the abbeys, monasteries, and such, and convents. And it's two young people who meet, two teenagers, a boy and a girl. And the young man was studying at a monastery that was destroyed, so he's escaping from that. The girl has been called. Her father was, higher up in the English society, what have you. And, but he lost his life because of, standing up against these times. And so she has been called to serve at the court of King Henry VIII. And she's kind of in a dilemma because, she knows that it was his directives that ended up having, why her dad was murdered, basically. And so these two young people put their heads together and figure out how they're going to get out of this, where they're going to go, what they're going to do. And, the girl actually is named Honora, which is my grandma's name. So, and the young man is Ambrose. And so, yeah, it's a really neat story. I love it. And as a matter of fact, the first people who've read it have said, when does the full-length book come out? So I guess that's my next assignment. Start
cool.
on that.
That's cool. Hey, Leslea, you've been on the show so many times and talking about how, what kind of conversations we can have reading these books of faith, and how, reading books of faith together with our middle grade and our older kids is a great way to share that faith and to talk about it. And that I think it's really healthy for our kids to question their faith and to talk about it and to even challenge it. I mean, our faith is strong, and it certainly can, it certainly can stand up to questions. What kind of what story did you write and contribute for the anthology?
Yeah, this was a really fun project because this is the first time I ever did historic fiction. And my story is called Grace Among Gangsters. So you know me, I have to have a bit of a mystery and all. But it's set in the 1950s, and a young girl is with her dad, who's kind of an archaeologist, and they discover some relics from a gangster from earlier in this century. So I thought it's kind of was fun story, but this character will be in a future book as the grandma so it was kind of fun to have a backstory for her. But yeah, it was just, somebody mentioned it was so fun because we all kind of decided what era we wanted to write and then wrote the stories and didn't know what each other was writing, and then just prayed that it would link together, and it really did. It was such a fun time. But I think this will be a great one for families to read together, not only about the history of St. Patrick and we talk about the relics and prayers, but also it gives you a little glimpse of so many parts of history, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. And I love the short story format because it's short. It's accessible. Kids who may be reluctant readers who may be reluctant to this idea of sitting down and co-reading and talking about a book with our family. This is something kind of ease their way into it instead of being, taking a week or two to read one story, one novel. This could be, kids little chunks, and I think really fall in love with this idea of reading and talking about stories together. Corrina, you have such an amazing imagination. I can't wait to hear your contribution to the anthology. And I'm really wondering, in your dystopian world, do they still drink green beer on St. Patrick's Day?
They certainly wouldn't drink green beer on something that they called St. Patrick's Day, because they'd all be arrested for saying that he was a saint. Because this is set in the world of the I Am Margaret series, where religion is completely forbidden. So you couldn't celebrate St. Patrick's Day as St. Patrick's Day. I mean, maybe they have like Irish Day on the same date, but no saints. So no, they wouldn't drink green beer.
Well, it's really fascinating that that in the world that you created, religion is forbidden and criminalized. And boy, I think that's a really powerful conversation to have with our kids, because we know that Catholicism, different religions, has been criminalized in different parts of the world right now in the time that we're living in. And I think it's important to think about that, and also important for us to think about, could that happen here? Could it happen to Christians? Could Christians become criminals here and in our worlds, in our societies? And what about other religions? Do we need to protect other religions and make sure that we don't criminalize their beliefs?
Yes, absolutely. This is the central premise of I Am Margaret, is that all religions are criminalized. Obviously, in the West, that means particularly Christianity. But they're also persecuting Hindus and Jews and Muslims. And any religious artifacts are illegal. So when the relic comes into it, it's an illegal object. It's like having like drugs or something. Only worse in the eyes of the authorities.
Yeah. Well, these are incredibly powerful stories. Now, we only spoke about, through my math, and we talked about 6 or 7 of the stories. But, Leslea, how many stories altogether are there in the anthology?
There are 8 altogether.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we have 2 other. I don't know if Carolyn wants to mention the other 2. Or?
Yeah, there's 2 other stories. We mentioned Teresa Linden, who starts it all off with St. Patrick. And then Susan Peake follows that a short time later in the early centuries of Christianity. So we really run the gamut between the 8 authors from, early church all the way up to the future.
Yeah. Well, I want to go through real quick and give everybody a chance to let people know where they can be found online. Why don't we start with you, Tony? Where can folks find out about you?
Well, you can go to my website, AntonyKolenc.com, or just Google Loyola Press and Shadow in the Dark, and you'll find me through them.
Excellent. Amanda, where's your website?
AmandaLauer.com, easy enough. And then also I'm on the Catholic Teen Books website. And my publisher for all my books to this point is Full Quiver Publishing. So if you go to their website, you'll find me. And all my books are available on Amazon.
Awesome. Right, Carolyn, you were on, you're going to be featured on an episode of the show in the future. Where can folks find out more about you right now?
At my website, CarolynAstfalk.com, where I have a lot of reading recommendations for all ages.
Yeah. Hey, Corrina, over there in the United Kingdom, where can folks find your website?
Yeah, my website is www.iammargaret.com. And my books are also on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the other places. Excellent.
And M Gaouette, where are we going to be finding you?
You can find me on my website, tmgaouette.com. And if I can just say also, you can find Susan Peake at SusanPeakeAuthor.com, and you can find Teresa Linden, Leslea, at Teresa, THERESA, Linden, LINDEN.com, and you can find all our other anthologies at CatholicTeenBooks.com, and you can find everyone else there too.
Yeah, and of course, we're not going to say goodbye without reminding everybody where they can find the work of Leslea Wahl.
Thanks, you're all so sweet. So my website's LeslieWahl.com, which is LeSleaWahl. But all our teen novels are on CatholicTeenBooks.com, plus links to all our websites. that one's an easy way to find us all.
Awesome. Well, we've been having a great time speaking to the authors of a great new anthology from the Visible and Invisible series. It's called Treasures. It's the third in the series, and it's been written by the members of the Catholic Teen Books group. And today we've been talking to Antony Kolenc, Amanda Lauer, Leslea Wahl, M Gaouette, Carolyn Astfalk, and Corrina Turner. My friends, thank you all so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Joan Akers. She'll be here to celebrate her middle grade novel, Riley Madison. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Again, we want to encourage you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. We have some beautiful merchandise that you can purchase that can help support the podcast. Of course, you can grab your beautiful Reading with Your Kids face mask. Keep yourself safe, keep others safe, and of course, let everybody know that you support the podcast. You can find it at readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guests, Amanda Lauer, Antony Kolenc, Leslea Wahl, Carolyn Astfalk, M Gaouette, and Corrina Turner. Be sure to check out their Treasures, Visible and Invisible anthology series. Also want to thank my team, Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan. Want to thank our amazing interns this semester, Hannah Pat Oboyski, Alexia Brown. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.